Hello and welcome to Face to Face. Today's show is a little bit different. We are face to face with something that all of us know a lot about, and most of us, at least all of us who work, contribute to every month, and that is the Canada Pension Plan. So, face to face with the Canada Pension Plan. Our guest today is Stan Dzbik. Stan is with the Victoria Labour Council. We're going to be showing a video later on, and Stan is going to introduce the topic of the video and why the Victoria Labour Council is involved with the Canada Pension Plan.
Organised labour is interested in the Canada Pension Plan because all working people contribute to it, and when they retire, they receive a return of contributions from the Canada Pension Plan, and we think it's important that people, after they've worked in society, that they be able to retire comfortably. And one of the problems now with the Canada Pension Plan is that it is not paying enough money to retirees for them to have a comfortable retirement. So this panel discussion, which we had in December, was a public forum, and it was talking about the reasons for improving the plan and how to improve the plan. And a lot of the speakers are very well informed as far as how the pension plan works and how it will affect the economy and how it will help working people when they retire. The Canada Pension Plan was first established in 1966 by the Lester Pearson government. At the time, the contributions were only 1.8% of the employees' gross income. And that turned out to be not enough, and as the years went by, the contributions increased, and at the moment, the total contributions to the CPP are 9.9%, and that means that the employee pays 4.95% of their gross income, and the employer has an equal contribution.
Maybe you can tell me, tell all of us for that matter, when does the Canada Pension Plan kick in? Approximately how much does a person get, and is it indexed to inflation?
Well, the Canada Pension Plan has a number of different options as far as payment. Traditionally, when you're 65, you can get your payment, and it would be the average of your income, 25% of the average of your income over your working life, and up to a maximum. And so right now the maximum is close to $1,000 per month. There are other options as far as you can have early retirement and start collecting when you're 60, and there's also options for the Canada Pension Plan to go on medical disability. And it's rather a complicated topic, and would actually require an expert to explain everything, someone who actually works for the pension plan in the federal government.
But that doesn't sound bad. Somebody who's retiring now can be getting up to a maximum of close to $1,000 a month?
And depending on their work history and how much they earned during their working career.
Is it indexed to inflation?
I believe it is so, yes.
Well, to me the whole thing sounds not bad compared to many private pension plans, which ain't been doing so well for the last little while, I think it's safe to say.
No, the one good thing about the Canada Pension Plan is that you can rely on the income being there, because it's not only is it invested in different areas, it's also backed by the taxpayer. So as long as there are people in Canada that are working and paying taxes, there'll always be a Canada Pension Plan. You don't have to worry about it going bankrupt.
And not even so much paying taxes as people working and paying into the pool of money, I guess.
That's true, yeah, because it's a segregated fund. It's not just going into the general revenue. It's going into a pension plan.
I know, going back 40 or 50 years, the problem was a lot of seniors really did retire after a lifetime of work. And everybody's parents, for example, and a lot really didn't have much money. And I think the Canada Pension Plan was brought in specifically to deal with that issue. And I think it's worked because Now, although that's changing again, but for at least 20 or 25 years, the number of seniors living in poverty really did fall, largely because of the Canada Pension Plan. Now things are changing again, and I think I've heard recently the number of seniors living in poverty is starting to go back up.
And that's true. Our society has changed over the last 50 years. The demographics, the number of people that are getting older has increased, and therefore there's a greater use of the Canada Pension Plan. People are living longer. A lot of the people that perhaps in the past, before the Canada Pension Plan existed, might have relied on their families to look after them. Now they might not have those families to look after them, and it's up to society to make sure that there are things available for pensioners to be able to have an income.
And now we're going to watch the video of the public forum on pensions that was held here in Victoria back in December.
We've got a number of speakers to speak to you this afternoon, and I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Before I do, I just want to say that the whole issue of Canadian pension plan reform really becomes, in my mind, one of the key kind of social policy debates of our time. And it's one of the things that I've been very proud that the Labour movement has taken the lead on. The work that we have done, that the Labour movement has done over the last several years has been, I think, really critical in getting this issue moving forward. And our first guest, Ken Georgetti, who's president of the Canadian Labour Congress, I think has played an instrumental role in moving this issue forward. If the Labour Day before the past one, so 2 Labour Days ago, the Canadian Labour Congress kicked off the Canadian pension campaign at our Labour Day picnic. It's been well received ever since. From at various points in time in the last couple of years, we've had either most or all of the various provincial ministers of finance on board, and depending on the day, we've even had some support from the Tory Minister of Finance of the day. So I'd like to ask Ken to come up and just give us an update on where things are at with the Canadian Labour Congress campaign.
Gee, thank you, Mike, and thank you everybody for coming out. It's tough to get a crowd out just the week before Christmas. I'm sure that's probably why they put these finance ministers meetings on at this time, because they don't think anyone will pay attention, because they're too busy getting ready for the holidays. But this shows how much you care and we care about pension reform, and how much you care about your children and your grandchildren being able to retire in dignity after a lifetime of work. Now, I'm going to date myself along with a lot of you in this room, but when I grew up, my best friend's father worked at a grocery store. His mother chose to stay home and raise the 6 kids in that family. And his dad worked for a lifetime in a grocery store and retired on a pension that him and his wife could live on for their retirement years. That's a dream now. That was a reality, and we've lost that dream. When we started this campaign over 2 years ago to expand CPP benefits, I remember people saying, "Why are you doing this? Why would you do this? Why would the CLC and unions fight for a better Canada pension plan when your members already have pension plans?" In fact, 86% of our members have pension plans that they'll be able to retire on with some sort and some form of dignity. Why workers join unions, some people say, is to get a pension. Why would you do this and take away an organizing opportunity? But here's what I told them. Why shouldn't everyone who works for a living in this country, as rich as our country is, look forward to a decent pension that can at least pay the necessities in retirement? Shouldn't that be a Canadian standard? Isn't that something that we deserve in a country as rich as ours? Why should there be seniors who have to choose between a roof over their head or food? We had a woman in Windsor to tell Hassan and I that when she went on pension and the company that she worked for, the pension plan, went bankrupt, and she had to go on social assistance and GIS, she was told, maybe you don't want those dogs for pets anymore. Maybe if you got rid of them, you could buy a little more food for yourself. You'd be better off without them and living more alone. And she had to make that choice, unfortunately, that woman. But she had to also make a choice on whether or not she was going to take her medications as prescribed every day or cut back on those because she didn't have enough money to pay the rent and put some food in her fridge. When over 60% of workers in this country don't have workplace pensions, and those that do have workplace pensions find themselves constantly under attack, there's simply no other solution than a Canada pension plan. It's portable, number one. We're told now, we're telling our kids you're going to have 5 different careers in your lifetime. You're not going to work in the same place for your entire life. You're going to move. Number 2, it requires every employer, this is what they don't like, to share the cost of contributions all the time. There's no contribution holidays on CPP, taking out their pension surpluses when they want to use them and then claiming that they're broke when the times get tough and pleading for concessions from us on those plans. Number 3, there's a real pension plan there. It's not just a private individual savings scheme masquerading as a pension plan. They call it PRPP now, which is not a pension, it's a savings plan. Again, for those that can afford it. But number 4, and this is the most important part of CPP, my friends, it provides a defined and a secure benefit for you. There's no guesswork involved in CPP. It's solvent. It's actuarially solvent for the next 75 years, and they tell me that's as far as any actuary will predict. But for the next 75 years, you and our children, and indeed our grandchildren today, can count on CPP to be there for them when they retire. It's protected against inflation. It moves up as the cost of living moves up. So you know when you retire at a certain benefit, it will be there for your entire life. And number 5, and this is where the industry that lobbies the hardest in Ottawa, that Hassan and I see every day, because you get to ask now, it's kind of neat in Ottawa, you get to ask under the Lobbyist Registration Act, who talked to the finance minister about these issues? It doesn't gouge with these outrageous management fees charged by insurance companies and mutual fund companies. Highest in the world, we have the distinction of in Canada. We charge the highest management fees in the world. 2.31%, they tell us, is the average management fee for a mutual fund if you have a savings plan. And the rule in actuaries is for every 1% of fees, you lose 20% of your savings over your lifetime. So 2.31 is almost 50% of your savings is eaten up over your lifetime by those people who are saying they're managing your fund that delivers a return at or below what the Canada Pension Plan does for you already. But the problem is that CP benefits are just too low. Only 25% of pensionable earnings up to a maximum of about $43,000 a year. And they were set on low on purpose. And I even remember this debate because there was a promise almost 50 years ago that workplace pensions would fill the gap. The industry said, don't make it too high. We'll put pension plans in place in the industry to do that. Union movement took them seriously. We bargained workplace pensions everywhere we could. We bargained them and we updated them so that they matched at least a 50% replacement of people's wages after they retired. But if you weren't in a union, guess what? They didn't match them. They didn't put pension plans in place, and now we've got a problem. Now we know 30 years of stagnating wages have made it impossible today for workers to save for their own retirement. That's the problem. So expanding CPP is the lowest cost and the most effective way that we see to address the crisis in retirement income that will only get worse if we don't act now. Because if you think it's tough today for today's seniors, think about tomorrow's seniors. Today's young people spend more time in school than we did. The entire labor market later, they enter it a lot later and carry heavy student debt loads after they get out of school. I know my son just finished law school and his debt's about $75,000 before he starts working. He wants to raise a family. He wants to buy a house. Think of that. And he wants to be able to save for retirement at the same time. Think how difficult that's going to be, even at the salary he'll probably earn. They're more likely to change jobs, young people today. And they're more likely to work in precarious jobs, unfortunately. Contract work, part-time work, with no benefits and no workplace plans. When you see all those job numbers come out every month, most of those jobs, if they're increasing at all, are part-time jobs, not full-time jobs. not jobs that can support a family, and usually people now work at 2 and 3 jobs in the cities. So that's why we're campaigning to expand the Canada Pension Plan benefits on a fully funded, go-forward basis. We're not asking for charity. We're asking to put a plan in place that we can contribute to along with our employers so that we can have a pension at the end of our working career. It's that simple. You've got a bunch of finance ministers over there at the, where are they meeting? At the Grand Hotel. Hassan and I have met with most of them. I think the only 2 we haven't met with is the finance 3, Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan. But this debate was actually started by our province here in British Columbia and the Alberta government, when they said we need a supplemental plan because CPP isn't doing enough. Then Alberta changed finance ministers to a guy named Morton, and he said, I don't even like the CPP, never mind the talks we had, and he shut that down. But we've got people's attention now, because if we don't do anything, our tax base is going to have to go up to start to pay for the income insecurity that seniors have. And that's a choice that we're going to have to make. Do we want to contribute to our own dignity in a pension plan, or do we want to subsidize through the tax base of Canada and the provinces? Simple choices that we have to make. But just leave you with one message. When these people talk about it, we've got to remind them again, this country, as rich as it is, doesn't deserve to have people living in poverty, whether they're working or retired. It's as simple as that. A living wage and a decent retirement is not too much to expect from a country as rich as Canada. Thank you for your support.
Next, I'd like to introduce to you Michael Prince. Michael is a Lansdowne Professor of Social Policy at the Faculty of Human and Social Development at the University of Victoria. But more importantly, Michael is probably one of the more knowledgeable people in the social policy area, and he's knowledgeable in a way that even people like me can understand. So that's he has a bit of a gift of the gab here to explain some of these issues. And you probably, if you haven't met or seen Michael before, if you turn on CFAX radio on any given day, you'll likely be you'll be hearing Michael, who is the go-to commentator on all kinds of government issues, and he's knowledgeable on all of them. And I'd like to ask Michael to come up and talk to us a little bit about his views on this subject.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the Canadian Labour Congress for sponsoring this event and keeping the dialogue alive. I've been part of discussions and forums on this issue earlier this year, last year, and I think it was a wonderful idea that with the ministers here meeting, the finance ministers meeting here in Victoria, to talk, among other things, about pension reform and CPP, as probably most people in this room know, that had been on the table quite seriously over the last few years, pushed aside somewhat with the focus on the pooled registered pension plan, the PRPP. But this issue is still alive, and to their credit, a number of provincial governments and finance ministers in various jurisdictions across the country have been keeping this alive, and with the help of the CLC and other groups, making sure that Canadians have this issue front and center, even at a tough, busy time of the year like now. But as I was coming down, I was tempted to think of some Charles Dickens metaphors of Scrooge and Tiny Tim and Christmases past and ghosts and so forth, but I'll leave that for you to kind of reflect on yourself. I've been asked to talk for about 10 minutes about expanding the CPP, why it makes sense, and I really can't add much more to what Ken's just said and what's in the materials at the CLC's latest update. What impresses me is the careful analysis using actuarial sciences, careful financial and accounting analysis on putting together a very responsible, affordable, sustainable proposal. You may quibble with details, and honest people can have differences of views on this, and that's the stuff of what should be part of the federal, provincial, territorial discussions among the different governments, and with Canadians there with their voices loud and clear. But the general vision of expanding the CPP, I think, is unequivocal. I think it's clear that that has to be the next step in pension reform in this country. So let's just quickly recap what we've seen in the last few years. With the crisis, financial and economic crises around the world, and here touching us in Canada, concerns around the solvency of various private plans. We saw a number of defined benefit or defined contribution benefits closed down by companies. We see some companies now not offering plans to their new employees to maintain their solvency. That's a dangerous trend, which, again, we should be on the alert about. We've seen some assistance to low-income seniors through a very targeted, very modest expansion of the guaranteed income supplement announced by the Harper government. Interestingly enough, again, this room, there's many people in here who will know this. When this was brought in by the Pearson government in 1966, the GIS, it was seen as a temporary program. It was brought in because we had the OAS, Old Age Security, a universal benefit. We had just brought in the Canada Pension Plan, negotiated by the provinces and the federal government. And the hope was, as Ken said, that the private industry had said to Mr. Pearson and to the premiers, set it low, make it at a 25% income replacement rate, CPP. It's got wonderful features, but keep it low. A subsistence standard of pension income replacement, because we need the room in the private sector to expand our registered pension plans at work, employer-based, whether in a unionized or non-unionized setting. And there are also the RRSPs, which had been brought in by John Diefenbaker in the late 1950s, which became more important through the 70s and 80s. But today we know that the GIS is bigger than ever. And in fact, one of the arguments now for expanding the CPP is to, in a way, preempt what will be ballooning costs of the guaranteed income supplement, which really is an indictment on the overall retirement income system in this country, that program, meant to be temporary, meant to be a safety net, is doing increasingly heavy lifting. It's doing more and more of the job what other programs it should do. We've basically had a 50-year experiment now where public programs have been held back, held down, the CPP most of all, to allow that room and expansion. We've had booms and busts, we've had several recessions, we've had several boom decades, but we're basically no much further ahead than we were in the 1960s when the CPP was held deliberately low at a 25% replacement rate. The latest figures show that Canadians with registered pension plans in workplaces is 34%. And much of that, the majority is within the public sector, and we know that close to 75% of people in this province, in the private sector, do not have registered pension plans at work. What about the RRSPs, which over the years governments have enhanced the tax incentives? Well, that's 39% of Canadians are contributing. There's huge unaccumulated contribution holidays. Even during the boom years through about 1997 through, I'll call them the boom years now, but the growth years of 97 to about 2007, when unemployment continued to drop for 14 straight years in Canada. And the economy was growing, employment was up, income was up. You would have thought then we would have seen an increase in the contributions to registered retirement plans, RRSPs. We did not. In fact, people were defunding. They were cashing out RRSP funds to help if their son was going to a law school like Ken's or others. Families were helping out other family members by drawing on retirement savings that they had. We saw a lot of Canadians dis-saving, as it said. Household debt has gone up during the last 10 or 15 years of growth. Now, one of the other recent things has been this fascination with expanding private pension coverage one more time. Again, we're being said, please wait, we shouldn't expand the CPP. Give us another 40 or 50 years. Maybe it'll work in the next 50. It hasn't in the last. So we come up with this pooled registered pension plan, PRPPs, targeted specifically at small and medium-sized business to try to create economies of scale. The federal legislation just received royal assent, I think, last week or so, and the provinces are being asked to pass similar legislation this coming year. So perhaps in the next year or so, you'll be hearing more about PRPPs. But I'm delighted to see in the CLC's latest booklet, Ken, some quotes and some statements, again, from a cross-section of people in this country. These aren't just cherry-picking friends and allies in the movement. These are actuarial science people. These are accountants and pension experts and consultants and economists. And ordinary Canadians tend to take a look. The PRPPs, the money will be locked in, unlike an RRSP. You will not be able to get it. There is an absence of employer contributions. The money will be totally from the employee, the worker. It's an automatic enrollment feature. You'll have a 60-day chance to opt out, but after that, you will be locked in. So this is being promoted as a voluntary private sector initiative, which as George Orwell might say, that's anything but voluntary, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of private sector in this. The costs are very much on the workers' income. Even if we give it the benefit of the doubt, even if we take some of the press release statements about the PRPP at face value, there are still many Canadian households at modest to middle income, certainly, that will be at risk of inadequate retirement income in their later years. So again, we've seen some attempt to try to improve RSPs through tax rules. There's some task force that came out, report on improving the financial literacy of Canadians, hoping that if we just know a little bit more, we'll be better savers. Well, that doesn't really get at the root problem of what's going on in the workforce and the labor markets today. So 3 concerns still are outstanding after the last 4 or 5 years of debate, discussion, and some policy changes, particularly at the national level. One is accessibility. Pension coverage will remain a serious issue in this country until the CPP is expanded. It will remain partial for most people in the private sector. That's the unfortunate truth, which ministers will not want to talk about, or their aides, even perhaps off the record. Even if the PRPP works to its wildest hopes of its advocates, it will not in any way put a major dent in the vast lack of coverage for most workers in the private sector. Inadequacy of retirement savings. Canadians have had to dissave. They've accumulated more debt. They will not be saving enough for retirement using these private sector instruments. And thirdly, as Ken touched on, the issue of security of pension savings, private plans. We're not out of the woods yet on the recession and the after effects of that. And depending on how Europe is going, we could see some other shocks to our system and our economy over the next year or two. So even with these reforms of the last 4 or 5 years on RSPs, better funding rules that the federal government's passed, assisting low-income seniors with the GIS, introducing this new PRPP, different tax rules, financial literacy, they really don't get at the main issue, and they are ignoring in a way the most important reform that could be addressed. Now, sometimes we talk about retirement income security, the system in Canada, in terms of it as 3 pillars. And one pillar is the public programs like the old age security and the guaranteed income supplement, the so-called public safety net programs. As they say, the GIS was there meant to be a temporary feature, and it's become a very permanent and important one. There's another pillar, which is the RSPs and the registered pension plans and the private sector pillar. And then there's another pillar, which is the CPP and its Quebec counterpart. And it's that's that last pillar that we've not addressed yet in the last 5 or 6 or 7 years in pension reform debate. We've looked at the other 2 pillars, but it's this 3rd pillar. And if we truly are going to have stability, all 3 pillars have to be properly enhanced and for balance and security over the next generation or 2. So expanding the CPP does make sense. Ken enumerated most of the fine qualities around the Canada Pension Plan. I think just to add to a couple of others, it's a national insurance program across the country. It provides, in addition to retirement benefit, there's a survivor benefit, and the most important single public disability income program in the country is the CPP disability program. Over $3 billion a year going out to over 250,000 Canadians who, through work, acquire a severe and prolonged impairment that prevents them from working full time. It's an important program. That needs to be remembered when we're talking about retirement income security. We're also talking about, and there are hundreds of thousands of Canadians now living on welfare in this country, on social assistance, who have disability. It's because they're not eligible for the CPPD, and there isn't any other decent income support program other than EI, which exhausts out after 15 weeks of sickness benefits. So here's another reason why CPP makes sense. It's got the infrastructure. We're not inventing something new. It was one of the best social policy achievements of the 1960s. It's a proud program. Canadians understand it. They support it. And the answer is there before our eyes, ladies and gentlemen, and we just need to keep raising our voices and getting the message out. Thank you very much.
You know, it seems an odd experience to be sitting up here and having a discussion about pensions on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. I think it's not something that we would think about normally, but I think for many of us, when we don't have to look too far, whether it's in our own family situation or our friends, there are many people, many of whom have worked all their lives, who have experienced in their retirement, which are supposed to be your golden years if you listen to people, experience a very difficult time in making ends meet. And that's, in the end, why we're we're here. We're here to make improvements for people who are facing retirement and are going to have challenges in their retirement. And I'd like to call up on behalf of BC Forum, which is an organization of retirees across British Columbia. I'd like to call up Gerry Edwards.
Well, good afternoon. Things haven't changed very much since the 1960s, when I was sent by the steelworkers to be part of the discussion on establishing the Canada Pension Plan. Big business at that time said, you can have a pool of money, you can put it out here at low interest rates to the municipalities, but don't you stick your nose in our business. Well, all of a sudden now they want to be partners. And, you know, it makes me sad today to admit that people that, and Brother Georgetti made reference to some of this, and I hear it almost every day. People who don't have enough pension, who every week have to go to the food bank. If they have a small pension, they have to make up their mind whether, if they are taking heart pills, for instance, that they need a steady supply of, have to make up their mind whether they will buy their pills this week or buy groceries. This, in one of the richest countries in the world, is a national disgrace. Wage stagflation is upon us. And instead of being able and moving forward, we're in reverse. Working people are losing every day. We need to roll the Canada pension and put enough money into that pension to give a good living pension to every Canadian citizen. There is no excuse, absolutely no excuse, for the policy of reducing corporate taxes when our workers are going to the food banks. No excuse whatsoever. And they will do more. And they tell us, oh, they will create some more jobs. Well, I can tell you, they haven't created one goddamn job where they don't have a chance to make any money. That's what governs. It's supply and demand. And they used to say that to us, you know, it's supply and demand. Now they say, oh, if we didn't have to pay any taxes, we'd have another 1,000 guys working in that plant. Horse shit! And a major thing now, and it's happening around the world, is they're attacking even the strongest units in our union over pensions. We've just gone through it at the old Stelco plant. They shut it down. I can tell you that the SOAR members, of which I am a director for Western Canada, picketed that goddamn plant every day. And they finally have a settlement there today, just last week. And that's what we will do. And we will fight. But, you know, not everybody has a union to fight for them. So we, as private citizens, who live, as I said, in the greatest country in the world, have an obligation to improve pensions until they're not a national disgrace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerry. That's I think that woke up the crowd here on a Sunday afternoon.
I apologize. I do have to be on a conference call with one of the Deputy Finance Minister at 3:15. It wasn't planned this way, but that's when he agreed to do the call, and it's important to talk to him. But I just want to make just a couple of important points, because getting you here, I want to say, first of all, I want to thank both the Labour Council, the BC Forum, other retired groups that are here, all of you for taking the time to be here today. And some may ask the question, especially if you're a senior in the room already getting a CPP, why are you here? I hope you're here because you care about the next generation. Just like the generation before you who fought to establish the CPP, the OAS, and the GIS in this country. And I think it's critical in this regard because I have a 3-year-old daughter. I hope by the time she gets to be my age, we do have a better CPP in this country. Because I can tell you one thing, based on the CPP we have now, she'll be living in abject poverty, even if she's lucky enough to have a job where she can contribute for the rest of her life. The average benefit that's paid today under CPP is $500 a month. You multiply that by 12, it's $6,000 a year. No Canadian, regardless of where you live in this country, can live on $6,000 a year. There's something fundamentally wrong with the system that was established to give us dignity in our retirement, can't even meet the test. And we have to change that. This is our fight, and this is going to be our victory, because we have an obligation to say enough is enough. But more importantly, as you know, finance ministers is not the most enlightened people. Not because they lack information or knowledge or determination. The fact is they need to be challenged constantly because they never push the envelope far enough to say we have to do this. Because everybody who's looking at the evidence today will tell you, if you are looking at the evidence, in 25 years from now, we will need $16 more billion, and that's on the conservative side, to meet the obligation on GIS, 16 more billion. While they can't tell us where they're going to find the money to fund healthcare, they're going to find another 16 billion? I don't think so. So that's the challenge we face. Fundamentally, we know that within the next 25 years, today we have 20 retirees for every 100 workers in this country. In less than 25 years, we'll have 40 retirees for every 100 workers. We will double the population. The reality is, if we don't do something about the adequacy of the retirement soon, guarantee you this, the majority of them will retire within the next 22 to 25 years. We're living in abject poverty in this country. We know for a fact 12 million Canadians rely on the CPP as their only retirement savings, period. 1/3 of Canadians have no savings, none, zero, in their retirement account to provide for the retirement when they get to that age. So we are in a crisis moment. And the CPP is based on a simple rule. You have to fund it as you go forward. You don't get benefits that you didn't pay for. The reality is we've been saying double the CPP and you will create some dignity for Canadians. But some will tell you, even our proposals are modest. But we recognize that when we started this debate. We have been at this almost 3 years. I've been to almost every one of these meetings with these finance ministers. And some people can say, why do you bother? I think we are making progress. But it's like 1 step forward, 2 steps backward, and then there's a circle dance, and then we kind of figure out, well, should we need to go forward again? This meeting is critical. And here's where you come in. These finance ministers were hoping they will make the decision. They said last June they support a modest increase to the CPP, fully funded, on a go-forward basis. But yet you're yet to define what modest means. I can tell you what my definition is. I'm not sure it equates with them. But to be honest and fair, there's a number of supporters in the room, other finance ministers, who have supported the expansion of the CPP, recognizes it's the right thing to do, it's the only thing to do. But they're not going to get there if we don't put pressure on them. We're hoping they'll make the decision tomorrow at their meeting to, at least within the next 6 months, to define what modest means. I don't know whether it'll be adequate, but the reality is from now till June, we've got a lot of work to do, and each one of us has a responsibility. First, I expect you to contact and write to your finance minister in this province, says, where are you on this question? To be fair to Colin Hans, who's no longer your finance minister, he did support expanding on the CPP, including your former premier. For whatever reason, I don't know, but it was the right decision. Right now, we're not sure where your finance minister stands on this question. We hope to keep the commitment of the previous government because it's the right thing to do for British Columbians and it's the right thing to do for Canada. The CPP is the pan-Canadian system. It's the best system we have going in this country. Whether we like it or not, we don't think the coverage of private pension is going to go up tomorrow morning. It's been dropping, and it's been dropping significantly. Some will argue the number of decades has gone on almost 10% plus, and it'll continue to drop. The reality is we'll keep fighting in the labor movement to ensure we have pension for our members. But this is not a fight for our members. This is a fight for all Canadians. We made that very clear when we started this fight. And sisters and brothers, we have to win this fight. So it's critical you send your finance minister a letter urging him to support the expansion of the CPP. 2, in the next 6 months, we'll have a massive lobby in this province to every MLA and every MP. They'll have to be heard from, because more importantly, we want them to support the expansion of the CPP at the federal level, at the provincial level, right across this country. In order for us to amend and improve the CPP, we need 2/3 of the population and 2/3 of the province in this country. It's an equation it's been established. If you don't have both, you can't expand the CPP. Same as amending the Constitution. We could do both at the same time. That's the reality of it, and it's a real challenge. But to be honest and fair, we have met that challenge once. We just have to meet it again, and we have to get them to complete the job. I want to come back to the point that Irene made. The fact is, if we were to improve the CPP, every improvement in the CPP will bring some solvency to the pension plan crisis we're seeing at the provincial level, including municipal government, provincial government, and private employers. Because the CPP goes up, it will reduce the pressure on the private plans in terms of the solvency question. But last but more important, sisters and brothers, we're too close to winning this fight. As you know, the struggle to establish the CPP in 1960 was not an easy one. It took a lot of hard work from people, one of them in this room here today, who recognized what the argument was, because the bank and the insurance company said we didn't need the CPP then. And here's the important question. We have had one of the deepest financial crises and recession we've seen in 2008. There's only 4 pension plans in the world that has fared as good as the CPP. Despite all the crises we have seen, the CPP performed exceptionally well because it's got a diverse portfolio, it's got investment strategies that make sense, and more importantly, is generating returns to pay the benefit. Second important point in regard to the CPP, there's never been a pension check that they have promised they have not delivered on. We can't say that about private plans, despite not how good we do our job as trade unionists in negotiating private plans. And you talked about the other features. It's got a spousal benefit should the husband or partner die. It also have a disability benefit. It's indexed to inflation. So forever and a day, your benefit is protected under the CPP. And more importantly, as the Pan-Canadian, every penny you pay, and regardless of how many employers you have, guarantee you're going to get the full benefit of your contribution when you retire, regardless of where you live in. You can spend your entire life living in this province. You choose to move in Ontario, your benefit will be paid in Ontario. So at the end of the day, sisters and brothers, we know the value of the CPP is work for working people, and we'll continue to work for people. And we are the ones who have to fight to ensure that it gets expanded. And more importantly, this important fight we waged for the last 3 years plus does not end because these finance ministers can't find their way to do the right thing, to make the decisions to move forward and say, the time is now, let's get on with it. You know, for most Canadians who spend their entire life working, it's a disgrace that they retire in poverty. It's not their fault they don't have dignity in their retirement, and we can make this a reality by simply insisting to our finance ministers and our premiers, the Prime Minister and our National Finance Minister, Jim Flaherty, you must keep your commitment to fix the problem. It's not too late to fix it. And if we do that today, we will make a difference for future generation, including my daughter, who's 3 years old. Thank you so much. Hope you do the right thing.
Thank you, Hassan, and good luck tomorrow. Hassan will be leading the delegation, dealing with the finance ministers and responding publicly as the discussions go on. And you know, not having been privy or being as part of a situation where federal provincial ministers are meeting, I was surprised to see the agenda tomorrow. You know, they're dealing with 3 or 4 issues. One of them is CPP. There's 2 or 3 other pretty critical issues. They're starting to meet at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they're wrapping up by 1. So they must be superhuman in their focus on these things. But you know, we will hope that bodes well for us and keep the pressure on. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's no short shift changeover, and they work their coffee and lunch. But you know, it's a bit surprising how these things work. And you know, in the normal construct, I think of federal-provincial relations, you would think that the provincial finance ministers as a group would be ganging up on the federal finance ministers on this issue simply to help balance their own books, because the poverty in our seniors population clearly ends up on the plates of the provincial governments in terms of welfare payments to seniors. It's a very strange situation that we don't see in the normal fight. And again, I'd like to before we go, just thank each and every one of you very much for coming out today. I'd particularly like to thank all our speakers. Maybe we can give them one last hand. We're going to have to speak to those finance ministers tomorrow about changing their meeting date, because this is a challenging time to organize a public meeting like this, and we really do appreciate, with all the competing issues that you've got on your agenda, that you took the time this afternoon to come out. Drive safely, be careful, and have a great holiday season. Thank you.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the video. We're back to Face with the Canada Pension Plan. Our guest is Stan Dzbik from the Victoria Labour Council. And Stan, during the video, they mentioned the pooled pension plan, which is kind of a private pension plan. That was mentioned a couple of times. Maybe you can just run through again what it is.
Okay, well, the pool registered pension plan is the alternative that the government came up with to expanding the Canada Pension Plan. And originally it seemed like that the provincial governments were more interested in expanding the CPP, but somehow they were convinced by the Harper government that now is not a good time to expand the CPP and increase the deductions for CPP. So the alternative that was presented was a pooled registered pension plan. And what this is really it's not much more than a registered pension plan that employers can do a payroll deduction for their employee and invest in this plan. The employers are not contributing at all, unlike in the CPP where employer and employee contributions are the same. And one of the problems with this PRPP is that it's not a defined benefit. It's like an RSP. So when the money goes in there, it's going to be affected by what the market does. And the second problem is the management fees, which when the PRPP was introduced, one of the things that was promoted about it was that it will have low management fees. But the low is in quotation marks because there's nothing guaranteed about how low it'll be or if it will change, and whether or not it will actually be lower than the CPP is highly suspect. The management fees for the CPP are considerably lower because it's professionally managed and it's a very large plan, and I don't think it'll be a private financial institution will be able to match that.
Yeah, and as some people may know, and I think was mentioned during the discussion, the cost to your pension of the management fees can be huge.
It is. It takes quite a big chunk out of your future return of contributions, paying that 2% or whatever. And Canada has the highest management fees as far as looking after private pensions. So it doesn't seem like it's going to be actually a real replacement for the Canada Pension Plan. Unfortunately, it seems like it's going to be more beneficial for the financial companies than it is for the people that will be possibly contributing to it, because once again, it's not even mandatory. It's a voluntary way of putting money into a type of pension plan, and there's no guarantee that everyone will be doing it. So there's no guarantee how big it will be, and therefore we don't know what the management fees will be. It's just an RSP, and the last 20 years have shown that RSPs are not the way to go if you want to have some sort of guaranteed income when you retire. The Labour movement supports the Canada Pension Plan because it benefits all Canadians, not just Canadians that are in a union. All working Canadians do receive a benefit from it. We feel that this benefit should be increased, and the way to do it would be to gradually increase the amount that the employers and the workers are contributing to the Canada Pension Plan, so that when these workers retire, they are receiving a good amount of money that will help them live comfortably when they're retired, and they're not a burden on the Canadian taxpayer.
So this is a very important issue. I mean, it's an issue that everyone, or most of us, we're all involved with it if we're working, because we're putting money in. We're all going to retire at some time or die, and I think if you die before you retire, you still have some money in the Canada Pension Plan. So it's something that involves us all. It's something that's important. Stan, where can people go if they want more information?
Well, if people are interested in learning more about the Canada Pension Plan and the reasons for increasing the contribution, the Canadian Labour Congress has some really good information on their website. And if you have a computer and you go on canadianlabour.ca, and that Canadian Labour is one word, and you can navigate through there. They have different tabs for issues, and a lot of good information and examples that help people understand this really complicated issue.
And maybe you can tell people how to reach the Victoria Labour Council.
Victoria Labour Council is also, we have a Facebook page. If you put in Victoria Labour Council, you can reach us there. We have a website, which is victorialabour.ca, and that's also one word, Victoria Labour.
Thanks very much. We've been talking to Stan Dzbik of the Victoria Labour Council, and this has been Face to Face with the Canada Pension Plan. Thank you very much for watching.